G'day guys, Tillis20 here, welcome back to Oceania. This episode is a bit of a continuation of the last episode of Oceania. We were working on this highway that stretches from Dundee, our capital city, all the way through the countryside into our country town of Paterson. We were trying to establish a bit of a road trip, that feeling of leaving the city, getting into the countryside, and getting into these areas that are distinctly different to the sort of places you find in the city. So we were establishing that road trip, and one thing that we did not create, and did that on purpose because I wanted to dedicate a whole episode to it, we didn't do any farmland. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be working on two massive farming districts within Oceania, probably the largest farming districts you'll probably find within the whole of the map, I should probably say. At the moment, we have areas that look like farmland within Oceania, but they don't function like farming industry. So my objective today was to turn these areas that only look like farming industry, turn them into actual farming industry. Now, the challenging part about that is the way that farming industry works within the game. First of all, it works much better, or looks much better, if you create farming industry on flat land. And I do not have flat land out this way. And then in terms of crops and cattle, I mean, placing them down, you need to sort of have them in a bit of a grid, which once again, that's really not the sort of area we're working in. So that was definitely a challenge. I have a couple of assets from the Steam Workshop, but there's also not a huge amount. I mean, there's a few crops, but they are also within a pretty boxy rectangular shape, and I just don't have that out here. So I'm going to be doing a couple of things just to make it work within this setting, and yeah, we'll have a little explore at the end of this episode. Like I said, it's a big episode. It's probably going to be about 40 minutes looking at it, which is double the amount of time that I usually spend. Yeah, it's a big one, but I definitely wanted to finish it in this episode, so you will see it all hopefully functioning within a live play. I haven't even recorded that live play yet, so let's hope it all works out. But my plan is to do a time lapse and get a whole bunch of the build done, and then we'll have a fly around and check out our little road trip through the farmland, through all this sort of area that we've been creating, and make our way to Paterson and hopefully see some farming industry absolutely thriving out here. And we are going to be making two areas of farmland. We're going to be doing this one out here. This is the Megalong Valley, taking inspiration from real life Megalong Valley. This is an area just below the Blue Mountains, a couple of hours outside of Sydney. It's really, really beautiful. It's an amazing part of New South Wales, and probably one of my favorite places. In fact, I really love going down here. It's been a couple of years, but it's absolutely beautiful. But yeah, lots of windy roads, lots of farmland, and a lot of these sort of cottages that sit on these big blocks of land. And the primary type, I mean, even in Australia, we do have a lot of crops, but I mean, in terms of agriculture and farmland, we have quite a lot of space for cattle. So this area down here, the Megalong Valley, is going to be dedicated to cattle. There will be some areas where we'll do some crops, but they tend to be the harder option just because they are so boxy, and there's not really, I mean, it would be really nice if we could just paint out a district and then say, this is where, I don't know, corn's going to grow, and then bam, it just starts growing in that area. Because real life, I mean, you don't really just have such boxy, such rectangular crops growing like that. I mean, probably more cases than not, you probably do, but it would be nice just to be able to create slightly different shapes, but unfortunately, not really. But we do have quite a few different options on the Steam Workshop. I am using this really nice set by Pidelmo, and yeah, I've just placed them just down there. I figured that would be a pretty good spot for them. There's actually quite a lot as well, so we're going to be seeing quite a lot of trucks actually coming out of that area pretty shortly. And then in terms of cattle, I found another great asset on the Steam Workshop. It is a propless paddock, so you don't have to worry about it being completely square or rectangular. You can actually just place it down. Unfortunately, the cows or the cattle that you end up choosing will just be in a bit of a square, and I don't really know how to fix that. And I guess it's not even really a big deal. I'm probably just nitpicking. But in real life, I mean, cows generally just hang out underneath a tree or two, and it would be nice to, would it be cool if they were you could just plop down a tree and saw them all bundle around one tree? Probably could just place down a couple of props. I do have a couple of cow props, so I could probably do that. Probably should have done that. Don't do that in this episode. But we could probably do that in some areas, particularly around where I reckon we'll do a couple of road trips. I mean, we got a couple of options for some really beautiful little scenic drives. I don't know, I like to do some of them pretty shortly. But yeah, I have created that whole area. It sits underneath a pretty nice big cliffside, which is again pretty similar to the Megalong Valley underneath the Blue Mountains. This is sort of an area that I am taking huge inspiration from. But I reckon there would be a bunch of farm stays out here and accommodation, and it would be a good little trip into Patterson as well. But yeah, I reckon this would be a pretty nice area. I also should have done like a wedding venue as well. Man, so many things I probably could have done. It happens all the time. I start recording these time lapses and then I realize, oh man, I could have done this, could have done that. Oh well, we'll come back. It's not the only time we're going to be working out here. But I have also failed to mention what we're going to be doing in the other farming area. So this area is definitely way out of the city. It is, quite a scenic, beautiful area with, lots of rolling hills, and it's definitely get the feeling of I'm out of the city, nowhere near it. Whereas the next farming district we're going to be creating is going to be just the outskirts of the city. You find lots of these sort of areas outside of any sort of city, these regional areas where it's more focused on, it's less on like farm stays and, scenic drives and stuff like that. It's more based on industry. So we're going to be creating much larger industrial spaces in areas just outside of Dundee. But for this area, I wanted there to be a bit of a mix of little tiny cottages mixed in with some industry and, these rolling hills. You got the valley that's just full of this, all these gum trees. Obviously, there's probably going to be like a little stream that sits in that valley, but because it is so small, I'm imagining you can't see it. Within the game, it's very hard to create little tiny streams. There's one on the right-hand side you can see, which is, I also sort of imagine would be a pretty small stream, but because it is so hard to create little small bodies of water within the game, I also try and create a lot of these valleys that you just sort of imagine does have some sort of little creek or something stretching down there. But it is probably one of the harder things to create within the game, so I just think it's one of those things where you just use your imagination. But that whole area I had to try and flatten out the land just ever so slightly, because we are dealing with, before it was very, very steep. But over this area, we've left the Megalong Valley. We're now working over in this little spot. Now, this one actually doesn't have a name. It is the outskirts of Dundee, and, we're going to create, this whole area is going to be dedicated to farmland. But I reckon it's no longer, this area is not Dundee. I reckon we call it something different. So if you've got a name, hit me up. We do need a somewhat significant interchange just here, because there is this road that stretches towards Dundee, and I figured we should probably create something that's going to handle traffic fairly decently, but I didn't want to create anything too massive or complicated. We are still out in like the regional areas, and I just didn't think we could really justify it. So just created this little guy and just wanted to detail it up. But, I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty useless at this line work and no controller. I do pretty much the bare minimal. I am detailing this up. It still took a little while. It does take a little while to create, but there are some serious interchange creators, and I am not that guy. I also don't really care enough about it, so I am just... I just kind of like do the bare minimal and go like, I think that's fine. But something that I did definitely want to establish is the change between a modern road and an older road. This is something that was suggested quite a lot in a couple of episodes ago. People saying that you should, have a modern interchange, a modern highway meeting a highway that is sort of under development. It's probably, it'll probably be updated within the next 10 or so years. So you can see it between the different types of, I guess, the line work, and then, you know, even the lanes. There's 3 lanes meets 2 lanes, but the road itself looks pretty outdated. So yeah, I like it. It's a nice little change, and I think it would make sense for the, you know, the highway to be updated as this interchange was probably built. So this interchange, you know, maybe it's a little bit more modern. It's definitely more modern than the highway that it meets on the other end of it, on the right hand side. So I would imagine they've probably updated all this highway and they've done the interchange, and then the next phase of development would be that a little stretch on our right hand side. So probably maybe even going up towards the valley where the dam is. But I did want to make sure that it is, you know, looking pretty nice from ground level. So we are going underneath the interchange, making sure that we have no, I think people call it mantle, don't they? Where you can see just the void down below. So I am trying my best to cover it up using this concrete network, and then just a bit of ploppable pavement too, just so we don't see it down below. But yeah, quite a lot of foliage around here. We are, you know, we're trying to cover up. It's, you know, trying to do 2 things. Trying to cover up some of the ugliness, but then we are still out in the sticks. So gotta try and make this area look nice and bushy in some of these spots. But then, of course, around some of the paddocks, we're gonna open these areas up a lot more. Just plopping down some power lines. I did actually have originally a much larger power line that sat around here, but it really just wasn't working. It was probably a bit more realistic. I think you would need a pretty significant power line heading out towards Patterson and even towards our dam. I feel like, yeah, probably should do something like that. But I don't know, it just sort of obstructed the beautiful views out here. So we decided to go for this much smaller one. And then a bunch of these rural roads, we have a mix here. I'm using some dirt roads, like slightly more significant rural roads, and then I've got some of these roads that, this one stretches alongside the highway. You know, it's probably someone's private property, or maybe a couple of properties would use this road. It doesn't really connect to the highway, but there would definitely be some sort of entrance there, but totally private property. So you don't really need any sort of significant or functional intersection there. So it's just a little pretend one. But we will place some properties on that road, a little bit of industry as well. But I am trying to just establish where some of the more wild or, you know, areas that aren't people's property, you know, just sort of trying to create areas that definitely aren't agriculture. And then other areas that are definitely people's property. So, you know, probably have some cattle on there or some crops growing. So trying to establish that with either a fence or just a bit of a barrier between the bushland and then the private property. But I think creating the fertile land actually really helps that, because the ground color does change, and then having the tree line at a different spot as well, I think is definitely very useful. But I am, like I said before, I am trying to make sure that each block of land, each property does have either a house on there or some sort of industry, so that we're not just creating these areas purely for aesthetics, so that you kind of imagine that there's a farmland on there. If you see a block of land, you know, with a border, whether it be a tree or some fence line, there is going to be some sort of housing on there, and or some sort of industry. It's got some sort of functionality to it. I really wanted to establish that. So you did just see, I just extended out the farming industry out here. So this whole area is now a giant farming industrial area. But these little houses here, you know, because we are still kind of close to the city, there are going to be some areas that are starting to become a little bit more populated. So these houses here are sitting on much larger blocks of land than you would find within the city, but they're not farmland. You know, these people might potentially own property out here, but these like areas are generally not really, they don't really dedicated to any sort of farmland. And then I'm going through and using Surface Painter to just create some bit more ruined texture around some of these roads, which I think really works, particularly when you add in a fence where the ruined earth is pretty much meets the grass, because it can be quite abrupt, but, you know, and particularly because when you are using Surface Painter, it does follow like a bit of a rigid, I mean, it wants you to create pretty much a square, and that is like completely the limitation of the game. I mean, the fact that Surface Painter works in general is kind of nuts, but it is limited to, you know, the size or the structure of the ground texture. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I think you can probably get what I'm saying. But unfortunately, my Surface Painter has reset once again, so I think that might be the third time it's happened with Oceania, and I'm sure it's my fault. You know, I think it happens, it resets, it basically disappears, you know, all the Surface Painter you've done within your save disappears. And I think that happens when you download stuff from the Steam Workshop while you've got the save game open. And I never do that while I'm playing the game. You know, I'll never do that on my PC while I'm also within the game. So it's just something that, you know, always avoid. Never download something from the Steam Workshop while you're also playing the game. However, I think because I've got Steam also open on my MacBook, and I think maybe it updates or downloads stuff while I'm within the game on my PC, yeah, that's when it causes problems. But it's so annoying because creating, you know, I make all this Surface Painter very intentional, and, you know, it's usually to add that extra little bit of detail. So for it to disappear, oh man, it's really hard. Now I'm starting to add in some crop fields, and the tricky thing with this, like I mentioned before, is that because they are so rectangular, it is really hard to make them work within this context. But, you know, probably in reality, this probably makes more sense anyway. I'm sure this is how they most probably look. But I am just trying to dedicate some areas to crops because we do need it for our cattle. So it is something that I actually have to do just in general. But I figured just little pockets of it would work. I do have to flatten out the land quite significantly, and then also just trying to put it within an environment that looks like this. It's a little bit of a challenge, but I think this sort of works. I'm using, again, some assets made by Padelmo. These are excellent because they are also, it does provide the prop version of it, so and they are way more flexible. So I am placing down just a couple of actual buildings, actual crop buildings. Are they buildings? I guess they technically are buildings, but just some crops are in there that function like the industrial version. But then a bunch of that are just in fact props, and I think that works a lot better because you can then get the flexibility around the landscape, but then place down the real assets within the actual area. Adding in some more areas for cattle and some properties on each one of these areas. And then these private dams, which is something that I think adds in so much detail, you know, just makes these areas look so much more realistic, make them actually look like farmland. It's just one of those small little things that you add, and then it just changes the whole area, you know, actually makes it look a lot more realistic. So I'll end up doing that to pretty much every single property that we have here. Probably would be better if I added it to all of them, but they do take a little bit of time to do, especially if you're going to add them to pretty much all of them. But I add them to pretty much all the main ones. But yeah, again, using Surface Painter just to create a bit of a dirty area around the pond, the dam. A whole bunch of people going into that house. I don't know what's going on there, but a whole bunch of people just decided to visit the house for some reason. Maybe they all live there. I suppose they probably do. And then I also wanted just to add in a couple more areas of crops because we have so much cattle, and the city itself is massive. So I feel like we need a lot of crops being produced. The cool thing is that you end up seeing a lot of Bruce Burger and Rip and Chicken, which are the custom brands, custom fast food joints for Oceania. You see a lot of them driving around these areas, so I don't know, there's something really cool about seeing those vehicles driving around, knowing that they go into the factories that you have within the city, and then they make the deliveries to the actual fast food joints. It's really, really fun. All part of the charm of this series. I really love that aspect of it. But yeah, doing the same technique here, just trying to make these crop fields work. I'm adding in just a couple of the actual industrial buildings, the actual industrial crop fields, I should probably say instead, and then the rest are just props. But I mean, the props are really great because they actually can mold to the ground a lot better than the industrial version of them. And then, got these areas that, obviously don't fit the crops, so they are really well, I mean, they work really well for some bigger properties. So trying to put in a lot of properties around this area, I figured this would be one of the last built up areas of Dundee, or at least, not technically Dundee, but it's still pretty close, that I still think it would be fairly built up. And this whole area, because we've got this highway that stretches along here, I wanted it to feel quite detailed. So I am placing out trees quite purposefully, not trying just to, just do random trees anywhere. A lot of these areas are still quite open, and I want to try and keep it that way too. The landscape, I mean, the gradient's still massive, so I'm trying just to make it work within this whole area. The houses, always tricky to place down when you are working on a non-flat type of landscape. My stream disappeared, so I added back our stream, so now that stretches all the way into Dundee. And for the last little part, I'm just adding in, just making sure that these areas, all these farmland out this way, have some sort of functionality. So there is some sort of property on there, some house, and then we've got some industry as well. So just either placing down one of those propolis cattle patches, or some sort of grain silo, or even just some of the growable industrial farmlands things, I think work pretty well. Things, what a great descriptive word. But then also some of these areas aren't as detailed, and I want to keep them that way because they're not exactly the forefront of, we're not looking at these nice and close up. So it's okay just to keep them a little bit rough around the edges. And then the rest of the highway will be done at a later stage. We're going to work on that whole area, probably when we do the big interchange leading into Dundee. But that is it for the time lapse. Let's jump into the live play and check out how everything is functioning. I wanted to start our live play off looking at Dundee and Paterson and just seeing the distance between the two places. I mean, it's not massive, but I think by having the highway travel through the valley, through these mountains, the landscape changing, and just the different things that you see along the way should hopefully give the feeling that the two places are really far away, even though they're really not. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off, we're not going to start in Dundee, but I think we'll start towards the spring mall, because all that sort of area is pretty done. All this area is also pretty done, but I reckon the frame rate down there would be a lot worse than it is just here. But yeah, like I said, this sort of area is pretty much done, maybe like 50% done. Like that's done, but I do want to add a train station here at some stage and just make these sort of areas probably like less farmland and more of this, because I think we'll probably have a bit more of that, particularly around the highway, and that's going to be a massive interchange at some stage, the biggest one in Dundee. So we'll have to get to that later, much later. But you know what? We've got a big journey ahead of us. Let's leave the spring mall. We're going to go past I love this little residence, but we're gonna love them and leave them. Heading through the power lines, going past our farm that we built quite a few episodes ago. We've got our power station, and we've got a Bruce Burger truck as it stretches through this whole area that we built today. So this is the area, and as you can see, I have really put in a fair amount of detail into some of these areas. The intersection, I really like this. There are obviously areas that probably need improving, but I'm just gonna probably leave it the way it is. Hello, Mr. Cow. Yeah, so getting a lot of usage because this is one of the main roads that is heading back towards Dundee. So a lot of people are choosing to use this exit rather than following the highway all the way across. But I reckon when we build that interchange, we'll probably see more people heading along this way. As you can see, only just a couple. But as I mentioned in the time lapse, up this way is where we're going to put the vineyard. That'll be a whole episode, and that'll also produce some crops. Because at the moment, we're not producing a huge amount. I think that's the only one amongst this whole area. Yeah, so unfortunately, because there's two. But unfortunately, because they are just flattened the landscape, you can't really place a whole bunch of them in areas like this. We are looking at a pretty hilly area. But I mean, these properties are so nice. I would love to live in an area like this. But what I wanted to establish is the feeling that the houses are sort of scattered around these sort of areas, and then, okay. And then as we sort of progress, leave these areas, then houses become just not really a thing. Because all this area is well and truly out of Dundee, so there's nothing really in terms of other people's property. Something that we do definitely need. I can't believe I didn't place this down before, but we got no billboards. How could I do that? How could I not place billboards down? So, I mean, a whole bunch of these custom Dundee, Oceania billboards, they're just so cool. So we're going to place down a bunch of these. Nothing really out that way, just because I haven't really detailed that area up at all. But, yeah, I mean, what am I going to place down? We'll probably put a top here. We've got a room man. We'll place one maybe along here. That can be where the top here is. Let's see. We'll place another one maybe like there. One there. Dundee Bitter. And then an Abbott's Onions, I reckon. Wait, what does it say? It says something like next exit. Oh, beautiful. So how about we do an Abbott's Onions maybe here? Well, it says 200 meters ahead. So let's have a think. Where would 200 meters probably be? Maybe like, I don't know, maybe like that. So that's 200 meters. And then you take your exit and then you chuck a left. And I don't know, do we do an Abbott's Onions? I reckon we build Abbott's Onions. I just did a quick Google of onion farms and they kind of look a little bit like that, kind of, not really, but kind of. And then I just placed that down there too, and just a little sign just to say Abbott's Onions. There's old man Abbott down there, so that's working. And while I placed that guy down because he's a marker, but I also found that you can place down these, I completely forgot about these, but these cow spawners. So my biggest complaint with these is that it's just, I mean, you can tell that they're just sitting on a square. So what I can do is, I think unfortunately I have to place them only on roads. So if I do something like that, then they at least spread out a little bit more. So I've placed a couple of them there. So I could do a few more, just like that, and like that. I wish I could place them around here, but you can't. So I'll do what I can, like that, just so it shows that they are in other places. They can spread out a little bit more, and that looks a little less weird. I mean, you don't usually see cows just wandering around like that anyway. They're all usually underneath a tree, but that's about as good as we get. And this one's not too bad, but we'll just do a few more. And I think the rest of it is just fine. Like, it's fine. I like it. There are some things that I really love. Like, I am obsessed with power lines at the moment. I say at the moment, but I think it's probably been a year now. I just think they add so much to your areas. So I'm always trying to do different types of power lines depending whereabouts you are on the map. So, you know what? Let's leave. Let's leave this area. We're going to follow the highway up as we stretch towards our dam, which I haven't even named yet. You guys did leave me some name suggestions, but I need to go back and check them out. Look at that. So Mount Grey up there. I've made him a little bit bigger. I've actually gone through and just raised it up a little bit more, just so it is super prominent. But it's just looks so amazing. I love how it pops up as you go through the valley. And we've just got this pretty awful looking service station / motel setup. And then we've also got our little lookout. So if you are just needing a little rest stop, there's a little cafe there and you can park your truck here, even though that's probably very unrealistic parking for trucks, whatever. That'll do. Okay, so let's leave there and we're going to follow our little road along. Trying to think of something I can place around here that's, I don't know, I feel like we need something extra. Because at the moment, it's just this highway, we've got the train line, but I don't really know what else we could put around here. I mean, maybe we could do another little turn-off. If I just did something like that. And then we could just do another little turn-off, you know, for people just to park, have a little rest, and oh, the train. How good is that? I swear, that train comes at the best times. Maybe just a little fence too, just to really, there's a barrier. In fact, let's just do a little fence. 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 Let's just do a little f Let's do it near the train line. I mean, I definitely think we need a fence, but that's not the fence I want to place down. I reckon we need some more fences. I don't have a huge amount in my collection, so I might need to go through and add in a couple of extra fences. I'm trying to think of what else you might see down there, but maybe that's just what it is. We'll just leave it at that. Although, I think we definitely need some little areas where people can sort of turn around. I don't know how these things work, but you generally see these things. They're usually kind of barricaded off, so you can't actually use them, but they are there. So I'll place a few of them just around. Maybe just another one like that. I think they're probably for emergency vehicles, not really for civilians. But I don't know, I just feel like there's something else we need to be placing around here. I just don't know what it is. Maybe we just leave it. Maybe we just leave it for now. Okay, well let's travel along. We get closer to Mount Grey, and we are truly in the middle of nowhere. Our beautiful dam, our beautiful lake, which maybe we'll take a little journey down as we head towards Patterson. Dodgy service station on your right with some dodgy cars. We've got the old highway, and let's follow down here. And yeah, I mean, this is a pretty bustling place. I think it's a super nice little spot to hang out. Probably, I don't know, I'd say 2-3 hours away from Dundee, and I reckon that'd be a pretty nice escape. As you can see, these guys are having the best time. I don't know if you saw them before, but I've now got a couple of dinghies. I just wish you could put people inside them because they look a little bit strange, just abandoned over there, but that's fine. And I've also got some campers too. But yeah, pretty bustling. But let's head back up, go through the forest, through the bush. Really great to see tourists actually coming down this way. I wouldn't take your car down on a road like that. And then, I don't know, maybe we'll take the old highway another time, but let's head towards Patterson. What I do think we absolutely need, some custom signs to say things like Patterson or Gilmore or Mount Grey Lookout and stuff like that. I don't think I have any of those signs in my collection, but that is something I reckon we should definitely add as we add more stuff to this area. All right, let's follow through. Yeah, all my surface painter has reset. That's so annoying. I mean, it's taken so long to place down in the first place. To think that I have to redo all this. Oh, man. All right, let's follow along. Back into cinematic camera. And we got our lookout. So I do believe that we need to probably... I think I might remove parking from here because it's just a bit... It's a bit chaotic, I think. I think I'd rather people park up here. So I'm going to go traffic president and no parking. And you can park down there instead. But up here, I like that the parking is just sort of like that. It is super scenic up here, so don't blame this area for being so busy. I definitely would be dropping in here every time I went down to Patterson, but it looks great, especially with Mount Grey in the background. We've got the forest and the valleys, and then following our highway as we head on down, and yeah, here we go. We've got Gilmore and Patterson to our right. So let's actually head back towards the areas that we built in this episode. And whoa, this is so busy down here. Whoa, okay. Might need to make some changes because that is fairly busy for an area like this. I guess I don't mind the busyness, more just the fact that we got these massive Bruce trucks actually going along areas that I don't think they would realistically go. I think if it was going to be a Bruce burger truck, it would probably go to a place like this, the flour mill, or even our main building, but I don't think going along roads like this. I believe I could probably use traffic president and ban some vehicles. Let's see if I can, I don't know, I don't want to ban all of them. Not that one. Well, don't want to do that. Vehicle restrictions. So yeah, that's not the option because I still want to see trucks. Like I still need trucks used in this area, but I don't want to see massive ones. So potentially that could be under a policy. Okay, this is the one we want. Heavy traffic ban. So I was worried that this was going to ban traffic on our highway because I still want to see trucks going along there, and I think that's still very important, but I don't think we need them going along these smaller roads. Hopefully if I tick this, we will see no vehicles driving along these areas. So I've sped things up. We've still got a couple of larger vehicles driving around. We'll see what happens. I'll give it just a bit of time, and hopefully that changes things. Yeah, that doesn't fix anything. So I don't know what to do about that. Maybe that's just something that is going to be a problem because, I mean, I guess they technically have to serve these industrial areas on these roads. Or what I'm also hoping is that when I work on some of the transportation options for some of these areas, hopefully that might decrease some of the vehicles using these areas, just because I don't imagine you'd see probably a lot driving around here, but I guess it's not too bad. But guys, that is it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to leave you with a bunch of cinematics because I just couldn't really stop recording. So enjoy the extra cinematics. But big thank you guys for watching, and a massive thanks to the wonderful people over on Patreon supporting the channel. Nick Dutton, Xavier Ramos, Harry Wilson, Ricky Merriman, Jamali Morton, Hayden Favourite, Mateus Winkelhausen, Lewis Ford, Tak Tak Takik, Sebi, Omar Salika, Chance A, Marcus Thompson, and Cesare Grossi. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!